Welcome back, everybody. Our second part here, what we're going to start to do is we're going to actually start to paint, or I'm going to start to paint here based off of what I've learned from these Diebenkorn works and kind of use very similar process that I use for the master copy. So something that I know that I've mentioned is that in my studies, in my understanding of Diebenkorn's work, it seems as though some of the first layers of paint on the surface would kind of cover a large majority of the canvas because I can see in these works, I can see where there's red kind of peeking out from underneath these works. I can see the reds, these warmer tones being sort of peeking through some of this blue and things as well. I can see some of that coming through. So I am going to, the first thing I'm going to do here with this work, and I'm trying to create this very much, use the still from this film Pulp Fiction. I'm going to use some warmer values because I see these booths and these nice warm browns in the sort of afternoon setting here in this diner. I'm going to just quickly use, what I have here on hand in my app here, Procreate. I'm just going to grab a brush. I'm going to make it pretty large because I'm trying to cover a large space pretty quickly. And I'm just going to color pick from the photo, and I'm going to just really, really lightly go over top of my entire surface with this color. So I'm just going to make some quick marks like this. And obviously this process here, we won't really understand what this is going to do until I get a few more layers of paint on here. But we will see some of this stuff come through. So what I'm doing is just kind of going through based off of the sketch that I have underneath and kind of placing in and pressing down a little bit harder some other value, some other hues here that are a little bit more saturated. So I'm going to kind of do that as my first layer. The second thing I'm going to do now, since I have that placed in there, I'm actually going to go into this work and I'm going to take a look and think about what my next move would be. And I'm going really, really more general at first, and then I'm going to get more specific as I go along in these videos here. So I'm going to grab some of these darker, some of this darker brown hue, and I'm going to make my brush just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to paint in dark where I see the dark values. And I know this is something that I talked about with both of my master copies in all parts of those videos, but I'm just going to kind of go in here and add this as a layer over top of what I'm working on here in this app Procreate. So I'm going to get some of that brown to go in the background. I'm going to just kind of generally fill in where I know that this figure will be, because we will abstract the face and things to try to match the style of Richard Diebenkorn here in a little while. Kind of fill in where some of those shadows might be and some of the rocks and stuff back here as well. So I'm just making really quick general kind of marks here with the material I have. If you're at home and maybe you don't have paint, you might be using pencil, charcoal, different things. Adapt your process to see, to fit potentially if this video helps you out a lot. So, adapt your needs here. I'm just gonna fill this stuff into dark, and the sort of shadow and the shadow on the shoulder here. We'll kind of come up here, and I'm just making general marks, and not being too critical about where things go. The next thing that I want to keep in mind is that with Diebenkorn's work, there is a real emphasis on space and how these structures are developed through landscapes and things in the background. So like, I'll show you all really quickly, the spacing between, this large area of like this yellow-green, for instance, to this small area of really dark green. There is a real understanding of space and how to build those things with what typically looks like some larger rectangular shapes that kind of summarize forms, especially in the landscape. So I'm going to start to do that kind of thing as well I'm going to color pick here with a little bit lighter of this sort of more peachy kind of red-orange hue. And I'm going to go through here and make this brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to just kind of place in some lighter values that will look a little more rectangular than what I'm used to doing here based off of the other studies I've done. So I'm going to kind of make some more square looking form, some more geometric type of areas here. And this will help get this to fit in the style of, very much so. So I'm also too at this point like looking at my artist work and noticing like the amount of blue hues that are used in this, where my still really the only blue hue that we see is some of that real light blue that in Samuel L. Jackson's character's shirt. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to color pick from some of this blue value, and I'm going to come over here, and this is where you start to really blend styles. So I'm going to get a little bit darker blue, and I'm actually going to use a darker blue for the table here. And some of you are probably thinking, well, Dave, that's not really what your still looks like though. Well, this is the challenge for this project, right? Is that I'm trying to challenge myself right now to think, how could I learn, or what have I learned from, this artist's work, and how can I use some of the stuff that I've learned to kind of bridge the gap a little bit? Because very much so, Richard Diebenkorn was not at all involved in the production of Pulp Fiction by any means, but I'm inspired by both of those things, and I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of bridge the gap here. So I'm just thinking about this dark blue as like a shadow, some of these darker areas, and I'm just layering that right over top of some of that brown value that I used earlier. So I'm just kind of placing some of this, and what's great about this process is that if I don't seem to like this, what I can do is I can do what Diebenkorn would do. I can just paint right over top of these things. So I'm just going to keep adding some of that blue in there. Now I've got this really nice, sort of temperature differences in my work. I've got some warmer colors, a little bit cooler color. And in the next video, I'm going to continue this process, and we're going to speed things up a little bit here too.